Breaking right now, Sly News, which is already at threat of being closed by Comcast for failing in both ratings and revenue terms, has been accused of being apologists for Hamas by top British Jewish businessman Lance Foreman, who has named a number of their hosts. So this was the post. Let me show you it. Since October the 7th, Sky News have been apologists for Hamas. These presenters do not know the meaning of impartiality. And then he named Dominic Waghorn, Mark Stone, Anna Botting, Kay Burley, and Yalda Hakim. Author of After the Pogrom, Brendan O'Neill, is going to analyse in just a moment. But first, I've gathered the evidence. So here is Alistair Bunkle giving a touching tribute to the dead Hamas leader who he presented as some sort of hero.
Palestinians, he for many years was the symbol of the resistance against Israel. He was the leader who took Israel on. And had he been found dead, cowering inside a tunnel, it might have created the impression that whilst the rest of Gaza was being turned to rubble and people were living hand to mouth, their supposed leader was hiding away from all the fighting. That doesn't look as though it's the case. It looks as though he was above ground and perhaps involved in some sort of gunfight with Israeli forces. And the fact is that that will not go unnoticed by many, not just in Gaza, but in the wider Arab world, that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, was killed, possibly, whilst taking the fight himself to the IDF.
Then Yalda Hakim parroted talking points during a disrespectful interview with David Mensa, an Israeli spokesman.
So Yalda, it does seem to me that you are very faithfully representing the talking points of Hamas. Just to be clear,
Mr. Mercer, I have spent the last year talking to different Israeli officials about this issue. This is not Hamas's talking points. I've spoken to American officials, your allies, your partners, including Israeli officials, including being in Israel on October the 7th to mark the one-year anniversary. So this is not Hamas's talking points. This is about talking about your objectives, and your objectives include bringing the hostages back home, and your objectives based on what your allies are saying. Just yesterday, we saw at the United Nations the US representative saying that Israel needed to provide proof that they didn't have a policy of starvation in Gaza. They are calling for this war to come to an end. They are calling for the hostages to be brought back home. But obviously, just the military route is not the route that is working. So are you going to go back to the negotiating table? That is the question that I'm asking.
So if I can get a word in edgeways, Yalda, before you interrupt me again. Number one, my name is David Mencer, M-E-N-C-E-R. Okay, you've got my name 3 times wrong now. Secondly, the Prime Minister has made the point crystal clear. Said our people go, you escape with your lives.
At least Mr. Mencer got the final word.
With this mission ongoing, we have a commitment to bring home our people and to dismantle this Hamas organization, and that is precisely what we will do, whether you, Yalda, like it or not.
David Mencer, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
And then, when they get an answer that doesn't match their pro-Hamas view of the world, Sly News just cuts them off.
Speed things up. We are about to run out of time, but I just wanted to ask you very quickly about that digital map. You're telling people where is going to be targeted next. People don't have power to power up their mobile phones. They haven't got Wi-Fi.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think you and all of your viewers saw our hostages being paraded through the streets as they were released to Israel over those 7 nights, and hundreds of Gazans holding their phones, videoing them. So clearly there's enough power to power their phones when they're parading our hostages throughout Gaza. Now that same power to their phones will be to get the maps, download the maps, look at the flyers, and don't forget, we're not only
Ladies
giving
and
those...
I'm so sorry, we are out of time, but we appreciate your comments this evening.
How convenient. Then there was Bel Donati, who compared Israel's war in Gaza to the Holocaust in an interview with UN Ambassador Danny Danon.
you've called for a voluntary migration of Palestinians from Gaza. In November, you co-authored a piece that appeared in the Wall Street Journal. You suggested the ethnic cleansing of some of Gaza's population to Western countries
Wilfred,
that would accept
you can
the refugees.
continue to
The
spread
exact
lies,
quote from that
and it will,
article,
but it will
one
not work
idea
for
is
you.
for countries around the world to
Continue to
accept
spread
limited
lies like
numbers
South
of
Africa
Gazan
and
families who have
Hamas.
expressed
That's
a desire
exactly
to
what you are doing
relocate.
now.
Do you stand by those
I will
statements?
not allow it. You know, ethnic cleansing, that's a word you used. If you read my article, I spoke about voluntary immigration.
I read that article. I did read that article, and I've just quoted from it.
Let me remind you that you spoke about ethnic cleansing. I spoke about voluntary immigration. And I think anyone in the world who voluntarily wants to move to another country should be eligible to do that.
Yes, the sort of voluntary relocation of many Jewish people during the Holocaust, I imagine. It is not voluntary relocation.
Shame on you for that comparison.
Let us please,
That's a shameful anti-Semitic equation.
Let us please go to the
I will not
subjective.
allow you to speak about the Holocaust.
You said earlier,
this is pure anti-Semitism, what you just said.
Mr. Danon,
the Holocaust to what's happening today in Gaza.
Mr. Danon, you talked about eradicating Hamas.
Shame on you
talked
for
about
this behavior. Shame on you for this equation.
Now, Bal Donati ended up leaving Sly News after that egregious interview with Israel's UN representative, but it does sum up their editorial position. Brendan O'Neill
is going to be engaging with Hamas. To compare that to the Holocaust is anti-Semitism. There is no question about that whatsoever. To suggest that the Jewish nation, through trying to save Palestinian lives, by the way, by moving them out of harm's way, to suggest that that is akin to what the Jews themselves suffered in the 30s and the 40s, that is anti-Semitism. That is the definition of anti-Semitism. So the fact that we have news reporters, not only on Sky News, but elsewhere, who are willing to make those kinds of accusations, are willing to throw around those kinds of words. And let's remember that a BBC reporter, pre-7th of October actually, said that Israel is happy when children die. Israel is happy to kill children. Someone at the BBC said that, and the BBC eventually had to apologize. There is this constant obsession with the bloodthirstiness of Israel, with the genocidal nature of Israel, with the psychotic nature of Israel. No other country on earth is discussed in the same way by our media elites at Sky News and elsewhere. It's bigotry disguised as journalism.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, the British Bashing Corporation, the BBC, has had a huge problem with Israel for decades. But I guess what fascinates me so much about Sly News, Brendan, is to see the evolution over the past decade, because, of course, it used to be owned by Rupert Murdoch. This was a network that was certainly on what you would probably describe as the centre right. But since being bought by Comcast, which, of course, owns MSNBC, the hard left US network, there has been a complete 180 in their editorial position. And we have seen people like Alex Crawford, their foreign correspondent, really act for much of the post-October 7th coverage as propagandists against Israel, which was never where Sly News came from.
Absolutely not. And you know, if you look at the difference between Sky News UK and Sky News Australia, you'll get a sense of, you'll really get a sense of how much things have changed.
Yeah.
Because Sky News UK, it was always a bit safe. It was always slightly middle of the road, but it was a sensible news outlet for a long period of time. It was a news outlet on which you would hear basic facts about the world and you would hear sensible conversations about the world. But it's become this bizarrely ultra chattering class, the BBC on steroids is essentially what it has become, whereas Sky News Australia has retained some of its independence and some of its willingness to question the orthodoxies of our time, and therefore it's attracted lots of new viewers, including viewers in Britain, in fact. So Sky News has absolutely lost its way. It's been sucked into the kind of Death Star of the media elite, which just turns everyone into a boring, orthodox repeater of the same old prejudices. That's what's happened to Sky News. But I think, you know, if you look at the events of today, if you look at what happened last night in Amsterdam, and you look at the response to it today in the media and on the left as well, People are essentially making excuses for a pogrom. And we really have to try and get our heads around this. This is unprecedented in the 21st century.
But first, though, hot flashes, sleepless nights, weight gain, joint pain. I know a lot of you are dealing with or have dealt with these symptoms, especially the women in the Outspoken family. Now, obviously, I haven't experienced menopause firsthand for obvious reasons, but I have heard firsthand from so many of you about the challenges that come with it. So I'm coming to you with good news, I hope, because by now most of you will have heard me talk about Verso. I've been taking their products for months, and it's been absolutely transformative for me. But today I want to focus on all you amazing women out there, especially those dealing with menopause or perimenopause. I've heard from so many of you about how tough this phase of life can be. Well, Salbean by Verso is designed to target those symptoms head on by addressing the root cause. It's formulated with ingredients that are proven to increase NAD+ levels in the body. That's huge, by the way, because NAD+ is what keeps your cells healthy and energized, but it drops off as we age and especially during menopause. Here's the thing. Boosting NAD+ can make a big difference in how you feel. Women who've taken Salbean are reporting some pretty amazing changes. Hot flashes disappearing, more energy, joint pain relief, weight loss, and mental clarity. I've even heard from some listeners who've told me their periods have come back or have become regulated and they feel like they've turned back the clock on aging. Now, the ingredients in Salbean have shown to balance hormones without going the traditional hormone therapy route. It also helps with inflammation and metabolism, which is especially helpful for managing weight and keeping you feeling your best. Plus, these research-backed ingredients have been shown to improve bone health, which is crucial for postmenopausal women at risk of osteoporosis. Now, what I love about Salbean, and I think you will too, is that it doesn't just mask the symptoms of menopause, it tackles the root causes of aging, helping you feel stronger, healthier, and more energized from the inside out. So if you haven't tried it yet and you're ready to take control of your health and feel more like yourself, click the link in the description on YouTube or Rumble, or head on over to buy.ver.so online and use the coupon code OUTSPOKEN. You will save 15% on your first order. So if you're tired of the sleepless nights, the hot flashes, or just feeling off, give Salbean a try. It's already helped so many of you, and I'm confident it can help even more of you to feel better too. So to repeat, www.buy.ver.so/outspoken and use the coupon code OUTSPOKEN.
People are saying, well, what did those Jewish fans expect when they went to the Netherlands and they started swaggering around and waving their flags and making certain comments? What did they expect? Another way of saying that is that they had this coming. They deserved to be beaten to a pulp by gangs of anti-Semites. They deserved to be thrown into rivers by gangs of anti-Semites. They deserve to be hounded by modern-day fascists who refer to themselves as pro-Palestine campaigners. That's the tenor of the discussion that we're seeing in the mainstream media today, on the BBC as well, and amongst the left. We now live in such a morally twisted situation that the so-called decent people in our society are making excuses for an anti-Semitic mob. And if we don't think about that, we're going to be in big trouble.
And indeed, and the thing is, Brendan, it is really worth pointing out, I went and watched a lot of those clips out of Amsterdam. And isn't that the amazing thing now, that we do have X, where people can post these videos and they're not censored by the mainstream media. Now, I can't show them here because they are so violent, but if people do want to seek them out, if you have any doubt about what went on last night, I actually do recommend it, but it's hard to watch. But what I really struggle with, Brendan, is how on earth can a Sly News journalist look at that footage and somehow take from it that the Israelis are the bad guys? But obviously this has been happening since October the 7th. I mean, I was one of those people very early on who were invited by the IDF to go and watch the unedited footage from October the 7th. And, you know, you'll never forget that. And so I find it really difficult to accept what is going on with these mainstream journalists. What is it? Is it just ingrained anti-Semitism? Is it woke gone wrong? It's bizarre.
It's both of those things and more. It is, they are blinded by bigotry. You know, these are the kind of people who move in circles. They go to the right dinner parties, they move in media circles, they hang out with the correct thinking members of the political class, where everyone, to a man and a woman, hates Israel. Everyone boycotts Israel. Everyone loves Sally Rooney for saying she doesn't want to have anything to do with Israel. These are the kind of rarefied circles they move in. They move in circles where one of the ways in which you demonstrate your virtue as a member of the chattering class is by being anti-Israel. That's where they live. That's where they hang out. That's where they have their conversations and their drinks and their chit chat in those kinds of circles. And it rubs off on the coverage that they give to the rest of the country.
Well, indeed. And the thing is, Brendan, I used to be one of those journalists, in the MSM who always thought we shouldn't celebrate when other journalists lost their jobs. So even though, for example, I was working at the News of the World when the News of the World shut, and that was all because of a campaign by The Guardian to shut down a tabloid newspaper, and it was absolutely celebrated, the fact that 200 journalists were losing their jobs. But I have to be honest with you, I've changed my view on that, Brendan, over the past couple of years. Sly News is losing tens of millions of pounds a year. Concast has not committed to it. It is under the threat of closure and probably will close in the next 5 years. And I will not mourn its loss because I think its coverage is now actually nefarious.
Well, it's interesting you use those two examples of the News of the World and Sky News, because I think there's a difference there, which is really interesting, which is that the News of the World closed down, as you say, as a consequence of a vicious, censorious, elitist campaign led by The Guardian and others, and also by columnists at the Times whose fat wage packets were paid by the money made by the News of the World. This is what people forget. There are people at the Times newspaper and the Times magazines who have got very, very rich through writing stupid columns that very few people read. And the reason they were able to do that is because their stablemate of the News of the World was a popular paper that lots of people paid money to buy. So there was so much hypocrisy and so much vindictiveness in this campaign to close down the News of the World. And that's something worth opposing. When the establishment says, we don't like this rabble-rousing newspaper and we're going to crush it, that is an authoritarian thing that people should oppose. But with Sky News, it's something different, because Sky News is running out of steam because it's not doing its job properly. Sky News is losing money and potentially losing support because it just isn't doing what it was set up to do, and it's becoming increasingly dishonest, increasingly deceptive, and it's not telling people the truth. So if a media outlet closes down because it just isn't relevant anymore, that's part and parcel of the media ecosystem. So I think that's actually legitimate and fine and par for the course with the media world more broadly. And I think the News of the World was something slightly different, as you indicate. That was a backstabbing campaign by the establishment against a newspaper that they hated, whereas Sky News is collapsing under the weight of its own rubbishness.
Indeed. Now, look, Brendan, I know you're a Republican, but I always love talking to you about the royal family. So stand by, because in just 1 minute, I want to end the show with a little bit of royal chat. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.